good, right? Righteous would be good. Righteousness of God. So somebody has an answer, somebody look it up for me then. Pull out your phone and look up the definition of righteous.
I don't know how you write it.
R-I-G-H-T-E-O-U-S. Righteousness of God. And this is important to know. I mean, if we're sitting here, we're always talking about God and how He is, and we want to know His character, but nobody knows what righteousness means? Do you know what righteousness means, AJ? What do you think righteousness means?
Being right.
Being right. We're going to find out here in a second, Nikki, you're looking at righteousness.
Wait, how do you write it? Right? Did you write it a little bit right? Yes.
Christian Vice. There it is right there. Read that to me.
Okay. The quality of being morally right or justifiable.
Justifiable. Morally right. So in this world, who's morally right? Is it the law? Is it... I mean, because isn't that like such a big argument in today's world? Like, who's right? Morally right. It comes to things like abortion, or, you know, if you want to get into the hard topics of homosexuality and transgenderism, and everybody wants to say they're morally right. Who are we basing our morals on? So if you go even further back than that, like, look at all the laws of the world, the laws of all the countries, the laws of, you know, how you go to jail for breaking the laws and whatever. How do we justify who is morally correct? How do we do that?
The question is it our job to do that anyway?
Well, is it our job? But whether it's our job or not, those laws and those morals and that justice is there. I mean, and God tells us to, you know, live by the law of the land. But who comes up with these moral laws? People, right? And so, but isn't that subjective? What's right for you obviously may not be right for me. So in the case of, let's just throw it out there, abortion. Some people think it's morally right because it's going to be better for them to have an abortion. But for me to sit here and say that's morally not right because you are just killing a baby, right? So how do we come up with what's morally right? And what is our standard? Opinion. That is what the world goes by. Opinion. Opinion is exactly what we base our morals upon. But as Christians, we base our morals upon the righteousness of God. God's laws are what we consider to be moral and justified. And so when we talk about that, do you guys all know what God considers to be moral and justified? Do you guys have any ideas on what are some things that God sees? What is God's character? What is God's morality?
Don't lie.
Don't lie. Okay, that's
Don't
good.
kill.
Don't kill.
Love others how you love something.
Yeah, love others as you love yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got don't lie, don't kill, love others. What else? I mean, we're going through the 10 Commandments right now, basically.
Don't cheat.
Don't cheat. That God doesn't want us to cheat. So, okay, don't lie, don't steal, don't murder. Aren't those laws that we live by morally in society anyway? Where do you think we get those morals? Where do you think all of the morals the main morals that we live by today come from? Besides opinion, right?
God writes the law, His law, on the heart of man.
On the heart of man. Okay. But He also hardens hearts, right?
Of course.
He also takes some people's hearts. So these laws that we live by, all of the laws of morality, probably surfaced from God. At some point or another, whether you want to believe it or not, like everything that we know to be right and wrong is from God. But also, God will give you over to your sin. So if you are so deep into your sin and you are so against God, God will give you over to your sin and say, go ahead, hang yourself, here's your noose, right? Go at it. So that's where we're at today in our culture, is we've got some people who are still abiding by God's morals and God's laws, and then we have some people who have been given over to sin. Is it not sin to murder? Isn't that just across the board, murder is sin? And, well, so is it okay to commit abortion? Some people think it is. So the righteousness of God, that's what we're going to talk about. And A.W. Towser, you guys ever heard of A.W. Towser? He's an author. A.W. Towser, he wrote this: what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Let me say that again. When we think about God, what comes to our mind is the most important thing about us. Let's think about that for a second. What do you think about God? And what that is, if you think, well, whatever, I don't really care, that's the most important thing about you. Ask God to give you a better understanding of Him as you study His Word. That's the only thing I can tell you. If you don't think that highly of God, if you don't think that highly of what we teach and what we study and the morals and the justification, all these things and the laws and what God has done, if that's not important to you, that says more about you than it does God. You could be one of those ones that God is giving over to His sin. And I know you guys are at an age in life where this is probably not the most important thing in the world to you. It may be. I was a teenager once, and God was not always the most important thing in my life. I was the most important thing in my life at certain times was me, how I felt, what made me happy, and what I wanted to do. Material things, like I had to have this or I had to have that, so I went out, I got a job, and I got the things that I wanted that I thought would make me happy, or people, or girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it was, that was what was important to me in my life. And so when I look at you guys, and I see what the age group you're in, and I'm not trying to generalize all of your standings with God, but I see how it's easy to not depend on God. It's easy because to be honest, you guys have it all pretty easy. You're all wearing nice clothes. You've all got food in your refrigerators. You've all got these things that, you've got what you need to survive. So why would you need God, right? But as you grow older and things happen, and sometimes it takes a drastic experience. How many of you know Bob, who's in the hospital right now with the motorcycle accident? I guarantee you right now, he's alive because of God. He should not be alive. And sometimes it takes drastic things to realize that there's more to life than you. There's more to this world than you and your feelings and how happy you are. It doesn't mean anything. So we're going to read, we're going to get more into this righteousness of God. The righteous God. God is righteous. God is the morals. God is justice. Anything that is good, anything that is happening that is just in this world is from God. All of it, because that's His character. Whether you believe in Him or not, that's what it is. So, most of you have Bibles in front of you. Go ahead and turn to Psalms. If you don't know where Psalms is, I usually generally will go to the middle of my book, and then it's somewhere. If you hit Isaiah, you've gone too far. That's Proverbs back a little bit. Psalms 30, Psalm, it's not Psalms. We're going to turn to Psalm 36. And this is a psalm of David. King David, the one who's slain Goliath. And David is known as a man after God's own heart. Go back a little bit. Keep going back, just a few chapters.
What was it?
Psalm 36. The P is silent.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Psalm 36, 6. And this is what it says. We're speaking of the righteous of God. Your righteousness is like the highest mountains. Your judgment like the deepest sea. Lord, you preserve man and beast. Think about that. Your judgment is like the highest mountains. And your judgment like the deepest sea. This is deep. I mean, this is like poetic language, right? The highest mountains. And what do you guys think of when you see like the highest mountain? Have you ever been to like the Rocky Mountains, or I'm sure you guys have been to like the Swiss Alps or the Alps or whatever it is, and just the majesty of these mountains. I mean, just huge, beautiful things. And what he's comparing God's righteous to is these immovable mountains. These things are there. They're not going anywhere no matter what. Right? They're not moving. They are there. So we see David, he's comparing God's righteousness to this. Why do you think he chose mountains? Why do you think he chose, of all things, as he's writing in this poetic language, in this poetic form, and I kind of already explained a little bit of the answer, but like, why do you think he chose a mountain?
Because it will never go away.
It'll never go away, right? That's absolutely, nothing's going to move it. No amount of evil doing or evil people or anything that's ever going to come along is going to be able to come up, take this mountain, and move it out of the way. Right? Nothing is going to move that mountain. So it's there. It's there for good. God's righteousness is not going away. No matter how evil the people have become, no matter how evil we are, we have terrible thoughts and terrible things that people do, and no matter what, it's not going away. This whole world could turn against God, but God's righteousness is still there. And that's where comes injustice, right? Because when God's righteousness is broken, what is Romans 3:23?
For the wages. Anybody? Finish it.
Yeah, for the wages.
For the wages of sin is death, and any who believe in me will be saved.
But the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Okay, but that's what I'm saying, right? Because the wages of sin. So God has justice. God is not moving. You cannot tear down God's righteousness. It is there. It is a mountain, like Mount Everest, will be there for as long as this earth stands. Not going away. Mountains were the most immovable objects that the psalmist knew. David, I mean, in his time and in his place where he is, when you're looking, the buildings that they had were not what you see today. They were not built of steel. They were not these towering. When he looked around and he saw things that were immovable and things that were unbreakable, the mountain was what he was looking at. And that's still true today. Buildings can crumble. The most unmovable things that we can imagine are mountains. So if you, let's think of this in today's world. So let's say you were the psalmist. What else could we compare to in today's world that is immovable? What else could we compare God's righteousness to? What are just some things? Like if you were to write that psalm today, what is something immovable? Just suggestions.
The star.
A star? Like the stars of the sky. They've been there since the beginning of time. They might move through the sky, right? But they don't go anywhere. They don't move away. That's a good one. What else?
The ground.
The ground. Okay, we can tear up earth. You know, we can dig holes, whatever. But when you misplace that dirt, it's still there, right? So there's still earth. I mean, that's kind of like the idea of a mountain, except it's when you look at a mountain, it's just overbearing to look at. You're just in awe and glory. You know, the glory of what that thing is. You're just in awe.
Plastic straws.
Plastic straws. Yeah. God's righteousness is like the plastic straw of the sea.
Killing turtles.
No. That's funny. But movable objects that, it's just great to think of. If you think of rocks and like how they've just been there forever. I mean, not even, you can take a rock and you can throw it or do whatever with it, but it's there. It doesn't go away. I mean, it stays to what it is. Why is it important to know that God, all that God does, everything God does is upright, just, and fair? So what we see in this psalm, as you keep going, it says, your judgments, what God's judgments, God's choices, the God's way that he punishes, the God's way that he glorifies, his judgments are like the deepest sea. What do you think he means by saying the deepest sea? Think about the psalmist at that time. Did they have the ability to dive to the bottom of the sea? Did they have scuba gear? No, they didn't know. They had no idea what was at the bottom and how deep it was and where it ended. So David, as he's writing this, he's thinking, your justification, your righteousness, your judgment is like the deepest sea. It's like immeasurable. To him, it was immeasurable. Now we may have these machines that can go down and whatever, but you've got to understand the context of what the writer is writing. He had no idea, but he says that it's immeasurable. Why do you think that's important? To know that God, what he does is so upright, just, and fair. What if God was a liar? What difference would that make?
Because you can't base morals on immovable values.
Absolutely. Why would you trust him? So if your morals are based on something that changes on a whim, then what is the point? So if one day it was okay to kill, the next day it wasn't, what in the world, why would that matter? It's very important that God doesn't change. God, the God of Israel, the God of David, the God of Jacob, the God of Abraham, is the exact same God he was then that he is today. His morals have not changed. He's the exact same. And we build our life upon that. Why? Because it doesn't change, and that's his character. It's very important to understand that he is upright, just, and fair. Is it just for us to be punished for sin? How do you guys feel about that? Do you think it's okay to be punished for you doing what makes you happy? If sin makes you happy?
I don't think it's man's job, but I think God has quite natural punishments that destroy lives.
Okay. Going along that, consequences, right? Is there not a consequence to everything you do? Whether a good or a bad consequence? Why do you think that is? Is that just plain luck? No, God is a just God. In one way or another, he is going to justify what is wronged. Us as people throughout history have done so much wrong. Back in the days, they used to have to do their sacrifices, their sacraments